What's up everyone, I'm Sid Vicious and today I'm breaking down my Hierophant Ice Spear Totem build for 3.26 Secrets of the Atlas. This is my first build video and the build itself is an absolute bossing machine. It's perfect for farming invitations, uber bosses, and you can even handle tier 17 maps if you roll them correctly. It's beginner and budget friendly, it doesn't require a headhunter or mage blood, and with a simple gem swap to freezing pulse, it's capable of smooth mapping as well. So let's dive into the build and see how it works. Starting off, let's talk about the pros and cons of this build. For pros, this build has massive scaling potential, dealing high damage early on and evolving into a carry service level build with high investment. It's excellent for all invitations, including the feared. It also performs well for essence farming and can comfortably handle 8 modded strongbox and altar farming. You can safely run most red tier map modifiers. In terms of budget, it's fairly accessible. You can accomplish a lot with minimal investment. And also being a cold based build, it benefits from freeze and chill utility, which makes mapping with freezing pulse very smooth. And thanks to the auto targeting of the totems itself, it feels very comfortable to play in a very hands-off playstyle. Let's talk about the cons. This build is not particularly tanky. If you're careless, hits will kill you. You're not completely 0 HP, so you can take some hits, but you need to play cautiously around boss mechanics. You need to learn their mechanics and actively dodge, but because you're totems, you could, run around very freely and pay attention to what the bosses are doing. You don't have to worry about upkeeping your damage. The totems will do that for you. It also requires gem swapping for smooth bossing and mapping, so sometimes that can be annoying to keep swapping back and forth. But once you reach high levels of DPS, you can often just use freezing pulse for most content and only swap to Ice Spear for uber bosses or much difficult juiced content. I primarily play this build in Trade League and I recommend it for that. However, you can try it in SSF. I did a test run where I reached red maps with just a 4-link setup, so if you're proficient in SSF and good at crafting 6 links and farming uniques, it can work well there too. Now let's dive into the core mechanics and the scaling of the build. The key item is Soul Mantle. This lets us use Ice Spear or Freezing Pulse with Spell Totem support built into the chest piece, effectively giving us a pseudo 7-link setup. Because Soul Mantle applies curses to us when summoning totems, we need curse immunity. For budget setups, we use Kikuzaru and curse reduction from our passive tree. In the mid game, we add reduced curse effect jewels and use Hinakora's Death Warden tattoo to reach 100% reduced curse effect. And finally, for the high-end option, we use Zealotry Sublime Vision, which makes us completely curse immune. In terms of crit scaling, this comes from our passive tree and jewels. Ice Spear itself already has strong base crit chance and multiplier. This makes scaling crit super easy. Next thing is totem count. We use multi-totem support, which gives us +2, the Hierophant Ascendancy, which gives us +1, and Ancestral Bond, which gives us another +1, allowing for up to 5 total totems once everything is allocated. And our main damage output is going to come from our curses, and for curses the key item is Anathema, which allows us to have a curse limit equal to our number of power charges. With our ascendancy, we gain at least 4 power charges, enabling for 4 curses. This setup delivers a huge portion of our single target damage. Next we have spell damage scaling. We gain a significant spell damage from Arcane Surge, which we get via Ascendancy, and we can further scale its effect through our passive tree as well. Coward's Legacy and Pain Attunement keeps us in low life and gives us more damage. Then we have a Militant's Fate jewel with the Dominus variant, which gives us Inner Conviction, and this adds 3% more spell damage per power charge. We also scale our damage through projectiles, and we will be using GMP as a core support, but when we have the money, we can upgrade to Awaken GMP. This is unnecessary, but it is really nice to have. We can also use Rain of Splinters, which adds 2 projectiles to our totems. And for our cluster jewels, for some budget options, we can just use a large cluster with Prismatic Heart. Elemental resistance from Prismatic Heart helps us cover some of our res penalty that we get from using Annihilating Light. As for medium clusters, we use Sleepless Sentries and Ancestral Echo. This gives our totem some cast speed, which is another way to scale damage. And for our projectile damage, we use Eye to Eye and Repeater, which is just a classic medium cluster jewel used by projectile based builds. And then for our high-end cluster, a 12 passive cold damage cluster jewel is what we're looking for, with 35% increase effect, 4% elemental resistance, 3% cast speed, and a flex slot for our final stat. And you can use the last slot for attribute or damage. For our weapon, we kind of briefly touched on it. We will be using Annihilating Light, and it's the core of our build here as well. It triples our elemental damage, but it applies a heavy resistance penalty, which we have to balance out with our gear. Then we come to our flask, which we use Dying Sun, which gives us more projectiles, Bottle Fate, which gives us Consecrated Crown plus damage, Diamond Flask, which gives us extra crit chance. Then we use Lavingo's Spirit, which helps us upkeep our totem by making so that skills cost 0 mana while the flask is active. And for our damage flasks, we try to roll them for 70% increased effect while with our flask crafting, and we pretty much use this for bossing only, or if we have to deal with an annoying enemy. We only need the flask up for a few seconds to absolutely delete bosses. Some other important items I didn't mention are Self-Flagellation, Heat Shiver, and Watcher's Eye, which are included in the Path of Building link. These items are used pretty much for more damage. And now we get to talk about our gem setup, which is primarily Ice Spear or Freezing Pulse for mapping. I also like to throw in Ice Spear of Splitting for map clear. I like to switch off between Freezing Pulse and Ice Spear of Splitting. They're both good for map clear. It's more of a preference thing with which one you want to try. And the main support links are Greater Multiple Projectiles, Hypothermia, Added Cold, Increased Crit Damage, and Multiple Totems. For our chill scaling setup, we have Cold Snap, Bone Chill, Unbound Ailment, and also throw in a Culling Strike support here. This setup chills enemies and amplifies all cold damage via Bone Chill. Then we come to our curse setup, which gives us a ton of single target damage, and we use Arcanist Brand, which will apply all the curses, and the curses are Frostbite, Elemental Weakness, Sniper's Mark, and Punishment. We place this in our staff, and for our 6th link on this setup, we can use either Empower or Enhance. Empower gives us more DPS, but they're relatively the same. And for movement skills, I like to use a Leap Slam with momentum and faster attacks. Pair that with Frostblink to animation cancel. And I just like to do this because it's very fun, pretty much. But if you want to be more like optimal, you probably should use like Flame Dash. And this would open up gem slots for you to put in other things that I will talk about shortly. As for our aura, we want to run Zealotry linked with Eternal Blessing. This gives us spell crit chance and more spell damage without mana reservations. And finally, for our optional gem setups, we can go Arrogance and Herald of Ice. This reserves life to maintain low life for Pain Attunement, and this allows you to open up your belt slot if you want. You can also run Cast on Death with Portal if you are like a reckless mapper and you like to jump into packs carelessly, like something that I like to do. Or you can also go with Arcane Cloak. I like to use Arcane Cloak manually for bossing because I can tell when certain mechanics are about to happen, or when I'm uncomfortable I want to pop it. You can use it with the automation support for mapping, but you want to be careful because it takes away a lot of your mana and can leave you in a vulnerable spot. So be careful with that one. Cast when damage taken plus Immortal Call. This is another optional defensive setup that's pretty nice. As for some offensive power and some more DPS, you can go with Vol Righteous Fire, which is going to give you more spell damage for bossing, Vol Haste for cast speed, which will give you more damage, Frostbomb, which applies cold exposure for more damage, and it will stack with the curses. Yeah, so if you want to increase how many buttons you want to press, this is really nice. Or if you want to make bossing like super easy with low investment, this is also a great option to have these gems. Alright, let's talk about my path of building and let's just walk through it. I just want to show you what to expect from it. First off, up in the top right, you will see different loadouts. This will let you preview how pathing evolves from all the different loadouts, and I primarily have them designed by Axe for the campaign, and then I have an early mapping setup, a mid progression setup, and finally an endgame setup. So first off, in Act 1, we are rushing Ancestral Bond, and in Act 2, we're picking up the Fire Mastery that increases damage against ignited enemies. Act 3, we go for Elemental Overload. This is going to give you more damage since we're not really doing too much with our crit at the moment. I also like to pick up the Recovery node that gives 50 life per second. It's especially nice during the campaign when you're dealing with bleeds or just need passive regen. And it's nice when you do the lab as well. There's some Dexterity node here as well, which help you if you need extra dex, and also provides a bit of cast speed, so it also gives you some damage on top of attribute requirements. You also want to pick up the Totem Taunt node because it synergizes well with the Flamewood support. You can switch between loadouts anytime using the drop down. It'll update the entire tree and gear to reflect that stage. This POB is exactly what I used in my test run, which I will link the VOD in the description to see exactly how I did the test run, and you could see exactly what items and how my progression looked like. As you'll notice, the gear is mostly junk. It's absolutely trash, but the point is, it shows how viable the campaign run can be. Now let's look at the Ascendancy. Around Act 3 or 4, I recommend taking Pursuit of Fate, first for the extra totem. It's a big boost in early damage. Then we like to take Arcane Blessing, which gives Arcane Surge, has 20% more spell damage, and it pretty much has a permanent uptime since totems constantly hit. Once you have this, you can drop Arcane Surge from your gem setup. After that, I like to take Conviction of Power. The power charges from the nodes give you crit chance, which helps scale your damage. I take this before Ritual of Awakening because at this point, we can only summon up to 3 totems, so Ritual of Awakening isn't quite as impactful until we get multi-totem support. You can play with the order if you like, but Pursuit of Fate first, Arcane Blessing second, and Conviction of Power third is my preferred sequence. In the notes section of the POB, I also include a full campaign guide. This covers what weapons to look for and the stats that you want. Anything with increased spell damage or added damage to spells is going to be helpful. Since we're leveling with Holy Flame Totem, you'll want to prioritize fire damage. If you find gear with cold damage, save it for your switch for Ice Spear and Freezing Pulse. If you get the links early for this setup, feel free to switch to it as well. Just remember to now take cold damage instead of fire damage when you switch to the Freezing Pulse Ice Spear setup. There's also an optional step for speed running, which I use Leap Slam with Momentum and 2 swords. It's not required, but can help clear faster. I talk about that in the VOD itself. I don't mention the Ranger Mule, but I like to do the Ranger Mule as well. It just helps us find early game items as well as getting momentum, which we can use later when we utilize Leap Slam. In Act 2, all you're picking up is Herald of Thunder. In Act 3, we want to grab Flammability, and that's basically all you really need to complete the campaign. It's super simple. You know, by Act 10, your setup is going to look like this. It's just going to be Clarity, Frostblink with Flame Wall, Flammability, Leap Slam with Momentum support, Herald of Thunder, and a 4-link Holy Flame Totem. Or if you have Ice Spear and Freezing Pulse, you'll have a 4-link for that. If not, just make sure that you have Ice Spear and Freezing Pulse in one of the sockets so that it will be leveling on the side as you're going through the campaign. Next, I want to quickly cover over the early mapping setup and recommend item buy orders. You really don't need these items right away. You can get to red maps comfortably just using a 4-link and campaign gear. Just patch up your resistance and upgrade your weapon if you can as you go along. First, let's talk about the map mods. This build can run nearly every mod, but some are annoying like Elemental Reflect, no regen, or less recovery. I added notes on these in the POB. If you switch to the early mapping loadout, you'll see the expected DPS and the gem setup. This build works fine with a 4-link, and then if you get a 5-link or 6-link, I included the link priority order. Gear wise, early mapping is just about life and resistance and attribute requirements. I also touch a little bit on the Alva gloves and how to use the harvest recipe to kind of convert the other Alva mods into the chilled Alva gloves that you're looking for. Then we move on to mid progression, and the goal here is to get a 6-link soul mantle. You want to use the tainted currencies to make this happen, so use tainted jeweler's orbs to get 6 sockets, tainted chromatics for color, then tainted fusings for 6 linking. You'll also want to get Annihilating Light around this time. As for the tree, you'll see the loadout shift towards crit and crit damage and the cluster jewels. I recommend starting with a cheap Prismatic Heart large cluster jewel and then adding some medium clusters with Sleepless Sentries, Ancestral Echo, Eye to Eye and Repeater. For the endgame setup, this is fully geared out. You'll see items like Militant Fate for Inner Conviction, Rain of Splinters, Sublime Vision, and Increased Flash Effect. These items boost for a big chunk of your DPS. Let's take a look at our configuration a little bit, and here we only have Arcane Surge, which is always up since our totem is constantly using its ability. Vulnerability is always up since we have it via Coward's Legacy, and then the curse stacking is automatic via Soul Mantle. So the config options in PoB reflect these settings. I don't have anything else more than that. And then for our skills, you can see we are using our same Zealotry setup and our same movement setup. You can take a look at the optional gem setups from earlier section of the video to kind of, change things as you like. We have Ice Spear as our primary bossing skill. I use Awakened Gems wherever possible, and then gem swap to Freezing Pulse for mapping. Freezing Pulse alone can hit 23 million DPS in the PoB, and the swap is fast and easy. and you could pretty much just permanently use freezing pulse unless you need to do a carry service. Then you could swap to Ice Spear. But the most important source of damage comes from your curse setup, right? So you must have your 4 curses applied with Arcanist brand, and as you can see, if you disable this in the PoE, your DPS goes down dramatically. So make sure you always curse your target using Arcanist brand when you're doing bosses. In the notes section, I go over some endgame items as well, so you could take a look at those for your shopping list. I estimate the final setup to cost anywhere from 70 to 100 divs, and that's probably really overestimating. It's a strong boss killer and a reliable carry build. And one more thing I want to show you is a quick demo. And so here's a little showcase of our bossing rotation. For example, we know Eater of Worlds spawns here. So we're going to preload the area by popping Mana Flask and summoning Totems and letting the curses from our Soul Mantle stack onto us. Then we want to drop Arcanist brand on the boss so it applies all the curses. You can also cast Cold Snap to chill and apply Bone Chill scaling. Sometimes the boss dies so fast I don't even need to use all my flasks. Just pop 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 and he's gone. That's it. I also have a bunch of additional videos linked. There's my SSF test run, about 6 hours long for the campaign run. If you want to reference what I did during the campaign, you can utilize this. I also show content like 8 modded strongbox maps that'll be in a VOD, Conqueror rotations, and invitation farming. Everything is timestamped and includes the Atlas tree, investment strategy, profit calculation. Like in one video I have, for example, I made 50 divines at 6 hours, and this is raw, unedited footage, the whole process of buying, setting up, and running, etc. And that wraps up my Ice Spear Hierophant totem guide for 3.26. If you have questions or want to theorycraft your version, drop a comment below or swing by the live stream. I will be streaming for the League launch. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and share. And as always, I'm Sid Vicious, and I will see you next time. Peace.